the way this manifests is as complete absurdity. This absurdity has become now incredibly clear in the case of transgenderism, because transgenderism does run up directly against the evidence of your own eyes. So Good Morning America decided to finally sit down with Leah Thomas. And Leah Thomas has become sort of the poster child for the trans debate because Leah Thomas is very obviously a biological man. Leah Thomas is an enormous dude. Leah Thomas is not a woman in any real sense. Leah Thomas, there's no evidence that Leah Thomas is a woman. Leah Thomas is a man who has had some hormone treatments and believes that he is a woman based on nothing, because that is literally an incoherent argument. I cannot believe I am something that I am not when I've never had the experience of being that other thing. If I say that I am a cat, there's no way for that to be true. I've never experienced what it's even like to be a cat. How could I say that I am a cat? First of all, objectively, I'm not a cat. Second of all, if I've never had the experience of being a cat, I can't say that I feel like a cat on the inside because, again, if you've never had the experience, that's like saying, I feel like I'm on the moon. You don't, though, because you don't even know what the comparison basis is. In order for you to make the comparison basis, you have to have had some experience with the other thing, but you don't, because you can't be that thing. It is logically self-defeating and incoherent. So Leah Thomas is, of course, interviewed by Good Morning America as a complete hero. And Leah Thomas explains how the reason that he is now racing against women and beating the hell out of them is for his own subjective sense of self-determination and self-realization, which is at the root of all of this, right, as we've been discussing. Subjective sense of self-determination and authenticity is significantly more important than any reality. It's more important than mistreating other people. It's more important than defeating a bunch of biological women who have innate biological limitations Leah Thomas will never have, because Leah Thomas went through puberty. And so here's what you get. The self-obsessed delusions of this is, this is self-obsessed and delusional to believe that because you believe you are a woman, therefore you should be able to compete against women and defeat them.
I knew there would be scrutiny against me if I competed as a woman. I was prepared for that. Trans people don't transition for athletics. We transition to be happy and authentic and our true selves.
The women who signed the letter anonymously said that they absolutely supported your right to transition, but they simply think it's unfair for you to compete against cisgendered women.
You can't go halfway and be like, I support trans women and trans people, but only to a certain point, where if you support trans women as women and they've met all the NCAA requirements, and then I don't know if you can really say something like that. Trans women are not a threat to women's sports.
Okay, so first of all, here I am. I am a beautiful feminine woman. And my suggestion is that as a woman, in my authentic self, I'm now more authentic than I was when I was living in consonance with the biological reality that gave me a voice deeper than the basso profundo of many opera basses. It is very, as a beautiful feminine woman living her truth, I say that it is incumbent on actual biological women to now accept that I'm going to defeat them in the pool. Ironically, Leah Thomas then suggested, and Leah Thomas's voice is significantly deeper than my own, by the way. Leah Thomas then suggested that he should be able to race against the women because biological transition had made him slower, right? The estrogen treatments had made him slower and weaker. So here's the thing, dude. The thing is that when you suggest that estrogen treatments have made you slower and weaker, what do you think an entire puberty of estrogen does? Which is what women have. What do you think that being a woman does to your body that is different than maybe going through puberty as a male? Perhaps these are different things. Why, it's almost as though you're right on the cusp of noticing that there is a biological difference between men and women that should prohibit you from, number one, being a woman, because you cannot be, and number two, from racing against the women. Yeah, but we're all supposed to just chat. We're supposed to not only look at this and not laugh at it or pretend that it's not absurd, because it is absurd. We are supposed to cheer for it. This is true heroism. It's not solipsistic, narcissistic navel-gazing in which my authentic self must be acted out on the world stage and all the world must validate me, including me defeating people who are of a different biological category, women, through sheer dint of my masculinity. Now, it's not about that. You need to cheer for me for my self-actualization. And that means that the entire world must mirror my perspective on life. Right? And this carries through, this sort of illogic and insanity carries through to every aspect of how the left now treats sex and gender and sexual orientation. The idea being that the only thing that matters is that inner sense of authenticity. And not only that, we have to teach it to your kids. It's very important that we teach your kids that the only thing that matters is an inner sense of authenticity as opposed to societal roles and duties. Because those societal roles and duties, once imposed, will now create unhappiness for kids. Truly what we need is instead to free your kids of all those constraints by force if necessary without your permission in school. If we do that, we will have liberated them. Sure, they will be free-floating atomistic agents with higher rates of mental illness and feelings of depression and suicidality by every available metric. Sure, if you free kids of roles and responsibilities in any context, this is what happens. Forget about sex. You do this in any context, and this is what happens. Because kids need structure. Kids need institutions. Kids need rules. Kids need roles. But according to the left, they don't need any of those things. You set them free in a field somewhere, and then you tell them to play with themselves, and then they come back, and suddenly, magically, they're happy people. This is the way that happiness is achieved. And going all the way back to Rousseau's Emile. But, of course, this makes no sense. And it carries forward to every part of life. It's amazing. So, for example, there are all these stories that are happening right now, and they're just absurd on their face. They're just ridiculous. But we are supposed to pretend that all of this is sort of normal. So, for example, the BBC has now altered a story in which a woman claims that she was raped. So she says that she was raped, this woman. And she was raped by a man, because typically when women are raped, they're not raped by other women. One of the instruments of rape is male genitalia, traditionally speaking. So the BBC, apparently a rape victim was quoted in this story from the BBC about a man who had raped her. The BBC then took the woman's quote and changed the woman's quote in order to reflect the fact that the attacker identifies as a woman. So now if a man rapes a woman and claims he is a woman, and the woman who is raped says, he raped me, this woman is now going to say, no, she raped. It's a Ricky Gervais joke. He literally told this joke on Netflix like 5 minutes ago. And the BBC is doing it in real life. According to the Daily Mail, the article in question reported on claims from some lesbians that they have faced accusations of transphobia and threats of violence if they admit they are not attracted to trans women. It carried the testimony of one rape victim, but the pronouns she used in recounting the ordeal were subsequently altered for publication on the BBC website. The passage of quotes on the site reads, quote, "They," in parentheses because they replaced the pronouns, "threatened to out me as a TERF and risk my job if I refused to sleep with them." Okay, now the original quote was, "He threatened me to out me as a TERF and risk my job if I refused to sleep with him. I was too young to argue and had been brainwashed by queer theory, so they were a woman." And it originally said he was a woman. They changed it, right? "They were a woman, even if every fiber of my being was screaming throughout, so I agreed to go home with them. They used physical force when I changed my mind upon seeing their penis and raped me." Or alternatively, that quote, so the quote makes no sense with they. Number one, because this is a singular human being. So unless this person has multiple personality disorder, there's no evidence that they are a they. Beyond that, this defeats the purpose of telling the story when you change the pronouns. That sentence reads very differently, they than he. Here is the way that it's written by the BBC. "They used physical force when I changed my mind upon seeing their penis and raped me." Here is the way it was originally stated. "He used physical force when I changed my mind upon seeing his penis and raped me." This is insane. So the BBC literally changed the coverage of the story and quotes from people in order to not offend alleged rapists. That is where we are as a society, and all of this is making society wildly better. By the way, none of this has to do with tolerance for trans people in public spaces, or none of it has to do with the idea that you should be vicious or mean or cruel to trans people by physically abusing them. None of this has anything to do with that. This has to do with basic standards of truth, basic standards of societal mores. To pretend that this doesn't have severe consequences for society when you completely discard objective truth, verifiable metrics of reality in favor of complete delusion, and you do this in explicit attempts to override the most fundamental institutions in society, the differences between men and women, upon which all of civilization, forget civilization, all of mammalian biology is predicated. and you do this all in the name of authenticity, that is a suicidal society. It's a suicide cult of a society. When you decide that identity is to be not constructed in accordance with rules and roles that actually provide the possibility of human happiness. But instead, we're supposed to get rid of all rules and all definition and all biology in favor of a free-floating you who is somehow going to pick from the myriad opportunities before you, and then we all just cheer. And that is not a recipe for happiness. It is not a recipe for having a society. It is a recipe for atomistic individualism that regresses into complete chaos. That is what that is a recipe for. I know what you're thinking. It's time to binge some more Ben Shapiro videos. Well, you are right. You should. But first, like and subscribe. Perfect. I'll see you in the next video.